At the helm of each submarine was the man who had the fate of the crew in his hands. These were the most strategically brilliant naval officers. One of the Allies' most successful was Malcolm Wanklyn. Malcolm David Wanklyn was born on the 28th of June 1911 in what is today Kolkata, but was known then as Calcutta. India at that time was under the rule of the British Raj, and the Wanklyns were a wealthy and well-connected family in the Raj. Wanklyn's early days was therefore that of a pampered colonial. Curiously, although his father was English and his mother was of Irish descent, a young Wanklyn preferred to refer to himself as being Scottish. That happened as a result of the Wanklyn family moving after World War I to Knockenham Lodge near Port Patrick in Galloway and AMP Dumfries, which is on the southwest coast of Scotland. Malcolm's father had been given the post of Inspector of Munitions for Scotland. By the way, a little trivia is that it's claimed that Winston Churchill and Dwight Eisenhower planned for D-Day at Knockenham Lodge. Like many of his generation, he came from a military background. His father was an engineer who served in the British Army during the First World War, while his uncle was the commander of a destroyer that successfully fought against German U-boats. Malcolm Wanklyn had harbored a love for all things naval from an early age and so readily applied to join the Royal Navy when he first could, aged 14. He was actually colorblind, yet was still impressive enough to pass his entrance exams for the Navy. By 1931, Malcolm Wanklyn had served on numerous ships and had been promoted to sub-lieutenant. His progression in the Navy thereafter was impressive. By 1936, he would be first lieutenant on submarine H-50, followed by HMS Shark in 1937 and HMS Porpoise by the end of 1938. Wanklyn's first position as commanding officer was on submarine H-32 in February 1940, followed by commander of submarine H-31 in May 1940, but it was with the submarine HMS Upholder for which Malcolm Wanklyn would become synonymous. He joined that submarine as commander on August 8, 1940. The war was not even a year old, and HMS Upholder had itself only been launched on July 8, 1940. At first, the submarine had an uneventful record. However, the daring sinking of the large Italian liner troopship, the Conte Rosso, on May 24, 1941, changed all that. That success would earn Wanklyn the much-vaunted Victoria Cross. The most successful operation by HMS Upholder would be on September 18, 1941. This was achieved against an Italian convoy of ships east of Tripoli, right off the coast of Libya, during which the sub hit and sank two ships, the Oceania and Neptunia, during a night attack. Each ship came in at 19,500 tons, making them the two largest ships he ever sank. HMS Upholder had already enjoyed other notable successes earlier that same year, including its sinking of another submarine, the Italian submarine Tripoli. This occurred to the east of Brindisi in the southern Adriatic on March 18th. The next day, HMS Upholder would sink the Italian auxiliary minesweeper B-14 Maria in a hail of gunfire, about 10 nautical miles north of the southern Italian town of Otranto. HMS Upholder made a total of 25 patrols while based with the 10th Submarine Flotilla at Malta, or as the Fighting 10th as it was affectionately known as by Allied naval forces. The Fighting 10th was composed mainly of U-class submarines including HMS Unbeaten, HMS United, HMS Una, HMS Unbending, HMS Unbroken, HMS Upright, and HMS Urge, among others, as well as HMS Upholder. The flotilla wasn't that large, never numbering more than 12 submarines. Yet this hallowed fleet of submarines was able to sink 412,575 tons of Axis shipping in the less than 2 years between January 1941 and December 1942. In fact, the flotilla sank no less than 49 Axis ships in just 3 months during 1941. The Fighting 10th had the Mediterranean island of Malta as its base, or more specifically, the ancient fort on Manoel Island. This fort was located opposite the Maltese town of Sliema, which itself faces the capital city of Valletta. Not surprisingly, this Allied submarine base at Manoel Island in Malta was a major target for aerial attacks by the Axis powers of Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. The base was so heavily bombed in 1942 that the flotilla had to temporarily retreat elsewhere in the Mediterranean. The island of Malta, then under British rule, was almost perpetually besieged for most of the war. The importance of Malta during World War II cannot be underestimated. Its location to the immediate southwest of Italy and just to the north of North Africa meant it was at the strategic crossroads of both the Axis and Allied powers in the region. This was particularly true of merchant vessels used by Italy for the purpose of transporting supplies and troops. In fact, submarines were not only used for patrols and to attack enemy vessels during the height of what was the Siege of Malta. Some submarines were also used to transport key supplies, including aircraft fuel. The use of larger submarines for this purpose was called the magic carpet. For all this, it's therefore not surprising that the Siege of Malta was one of the bloodiest and most intense theaters of war in Europe during World War II. HMS Upholder left its base in Malta for its 25th mission, before which she was scheduled to return to base for a refit. Wanklyn's submarine was first sent to patrol east of Jerba Island off the coast of Tunisia. It was then ordered to form a patrol line with HMS Urge and HMS Thrasher on April 12, 1942, in order to intercept an Italian convoy heading to Libya. It would be the submarine and Malcolm Wanklyn's final mission. It was 2 days later, on the evening of April 14, 1942, that Lieutenant Commander Wanklyn would have first sighted the enemy troop convoy off the coast of North Africa. Not much is known about what actually happened that night to HMS Upholder, and how exactly it sank. It is believed the British sub was hit by the Italian Orsa-class torpedo boat, MTB Pegaso. There is also a strong chance that she was hit by a mine, given that the action that night would have brought her very close to a known Italian minefield. That particular minefield was laid down in May 1941 by the Italian destroyers, Alvise da Mosto and Giovanni da Verrazzano. It has been said that the submarine sank at position 34°47 north 15°55 east. However, no debris of HMS Upholder was seen on the surface at the time. She failed to return to harbor on its scheduled date, and soon there was only one conclusion: all lives on HMS Upholder had been lost. The prowess of HMS Upholder under the outstanding leadership of Malcolm Wanklyn was lauded at the very highest levels in Britain. Consider this official communiqué issued by the British Admiralty, remarkable in that it singled out Malcolm Wanklyn and his crew, and which read as follows: "The Board of the Admiralty regrets to announce that HM Submarine Upholder, Lieutenant Commander M.D. Wanklyn VC, DSO and double bar RN, has been lost. Next of kin have been informed. It is seldom proper for their lordships to draw distinction between different services rendered in the course of Navy duty, but they take this opportunity of singling out those of Upholder under the command of Lieutenant Commander Wanklyn for special mention." The Admiralty communiqué continued: "She was long employed against enemy communications in the central Mediterranean, and she became known for the uniform high quality of her services in that arduous and dangerous duty." Such was the standard of skill and cool intrepidity set by Lieutenant Commander Wanklyn and the officers and men under him. They and their ship became an inspiration not only in their own flotilla, but to the fleet of which it was a part, and to Malta, where for so long it was based. The ship and her company have gone, but their example and inspiration remain. Commander George Simpson was Wanklyn's squadron commander, and he had this to say about him after his death: "I have lost a friend and advisor who I believe I knew better than my brother. His record of brilliant leadership will never be equaled. He was by his very qualities of modesty, ability, determination, courage, and character a giant among us." Commander Simpson would then go on to say about Lieutenant Commander Malcolm Wanklyn, "The island of Malta worshipped him. This tribute is no overstatement." In the end, Malcolm Wanklyn and his crew sank no less than 5 Kriegsmarine Nazi German naval vessels, 1 vessel from Vichy, France, and no less than 18 vessels belonging to the Italian Regia Marina or Royal Navy. As mentioned at the beginning of this video, Malcolm Wanklyn had spent his formative years in Scotland and developed a deep love and affinity for that country. He'd spent 5 years during his childhood at Knockenham Lodge in Port Patrick. Therefore, it's very fitting that a commemorative blue plaque was placed at the property by the Submariners Association in 2017. The same Submariners Association would issue a statement about Malcolm Wanklyn that read, "Using a combination of innate skill and inspired tactical awareness, he went on to success after success. Not only was he a renowned attacker, but was also cool and calm in defense." Coincidentally, a second HMS Upholder would be launched by the British Navy in 1986 as a lead ship of its class, and in honor of the original HMS Upholder, that went down in 1942. On a final note, a certain Captain Crawford died on June 28, 2017, just one day after his 100th birthday. And who was Captain Crawford? He was the last surviving commander of a submarine in what was known as the Fighting 10th Submarine Flotilla, the flotilla that protected the island of Malta. He no doubt had held Lieutenant Commander Malcolm Wanklyn in the highest of esteem. Everyone else did, and still does.